Okay, the presentation I'm going to give today is really the story of how we've managed to produce this report from government about the landscape of the future of NDT in the UK economy. Nice snappy title. It's the sort of title that the government departments love because it's talking about the future and how we're going to impact it. So we published the report in April 2014, that's this year. A copy has been sent to every member this month in their journal, so all of those of you who get the journal should have a copy. We've distributed it around the exhibition centre, and anyone who isn't a receiver of the Institute Journal has an opportunity to pick up the copy today. And whether you want it or not, you're going to have one. So could people put their hands up who don't necessarily get the journal, and our staff will distribute the copies. So if you could finally show, then we can do that. Okay, keep your hand up until the copy is given, please. So what I want to talk about is a bit about how it was produced and how we should use it. And the really vital bit is that we use this to its maximum benefit. So in 2010-2011, the Institute recognised that there were a number of pressures that needed to be addressed, and one of which was that we have very poor recognition by government of our worth. And Steve Lavender was the guy who really started this off, and he started having meetings with his local MP, and she was part of the Science and Technology Committee, and so we ended up with a delegation going to the House of Parliament, or Portcullis House, and we got a little bit of a reaction that was perhaps unexpected. They really didn't want to know too much about us unless we could describe ourselves. And they needed to know how big we were, they needed to know did we matter, what happened if we weren't here, and if we did matter, then what were the problems, why weren't we making a bigger difference. And at the same time, there's a set of government groups called Knowledge Transfer Networks were looking into, the one in materials was looking into NDT and was deciding that really there's some sort of connection was needed. And so these two things came together with the Institute thinking about, or our centaur thinking about, what we ought to do. And we needed to be like other sectors and know more about ourselves. And then we can tell other people. So we went to the British Institute NDT Industry Committee, set up a working group. And I have to thank Carl for volunteering a chairman, happened to be me. And there was very kindly a dozen other people also volunteered to participate. And we also had the help of Robin Young from the Materials Knowledge Transfer Network, who was able to encourage any activity in our sector. So he came to us and said, what can we do to get information flowing a bit more, to get an understanding better out of your sector? And to try and formalise it a bit, we came across we set up some terms of reference. And just so as you understand the idea of these knowledge transfer networks, which I have to say were complete fog to me before I met them, they like to engage with cross-cutting groups and try and bring in the engineering requirements, the knowledge base, and the business acumen to progress that particular area. And Robin felt that with NDT we impacted a lot of other areas other than materials, and so he brought in people from knowledge transfer networks in transport, energy, aerospace, defence, measurement, the built environment. There's a whole load of these people, and they started to join our working group, and we set ourselves a mission which was to help UK industry to optimise the use of NDT and related technologies, to inform and promote the future developments of the benefit for high-value manufacturing, as we've got sit out there. So to do that, we felt that first of all, as the centaur said, we need to understand ourselves. So we set out a survey, and we sent it to our 12 volunteers who all came from this range of sectors. We tried a few other sectors, but we struggled with getting people to send the surveys back, but that's how it is. However, this was quite a good spread, and in the very middle bit of this report there is a table with the diluted responses from all those sectors. The type is quite small, so optical aids are probably a good idea. So where we are with the report at the moment is that, if you remember, this time last year we had a draft version available and I distributed 200 copies, and from those we had 81 sets of inputs back as suggestions for inclusion into the report. Those were mostly incorporated. We've left one spelling mistake in, just in case people don't read it, we can tell, and I want to hear people saying, did you know that spelling mistake was that on page 12? And I'll say, yes, I did, and well done for getting that far. There are hard copies being distributed today, and there's also, they're downloadable from these two very short, crisp websites. Out of the report came some really key areas. One was facts about our industry are very thin on the ground. And we know we have an aging demographic. There was a strong survey done by the Institute in 2007, and I was thrilled to see that one of the presentations about socialising NDT actually used that data from this report to demonstrate the fact that we've got to address our aging population. What I've written in bold here is stuff we know. What I've written in grey here is stuff we've estimated. I think the estimates are conservative, so I feel we could probably be doing better than this. But nonetheless, we don't know. And when Cameron was giving his presentation this morning, following the work on this report, I've set him an objective for this year is to start finding mechanisms to find out this in much firmer data. So we reckon there are about 35,000 NDT inspectors in the UK. And if you take the various qualification schemes, PCN is one of them, there's CSWIP, there's various others, the company ones, then you tot it all up, it's probably about 35,000. And then if you age the population that we had that snapshot in 2007, by 2017 we're going to be 9% underpopulated if we keep that same demographic going. And then if you take another 10 years onto that, we're going to be 15% underpopulated. And to make that about right, we need to be taking in fact, just to keep stable, we need to be taking in about 500 a year. But if we want to maintain the growth we've seen over the last 5 years, then we really ought to be looking at about 850 a year. And again, it's very hard to tell what intake rate we're getting. But if we manage to, say, start the Trailblazer scheme and we're getting 200 apprentices a year, then that's going to have a big impact on this shortfall of people. And then we were asked the question by the MPs as to, well, so how many inspections are done? What goes on? Who does what? And so we reckon, or I reckon, there are 25,000 inspections done every day, and I think that's an extremely low estimate. I know for a fact there's about 3,000 done at a factory in Inchinin, which is just by Glasgow Airport every day. So apart from Saturday and Sunday, that is. And however, we do know the impact that these inspections have. And there was a beautiful paper presented at this conference a couple of years ago by John Harris from Network Rail, where they know the defects they've missed because the rails break. And so they went from 900 rail breaks a year down to about 125 by applying a managed NDT process. And it's that sort of impact that if we can describe it clearly enough, we can sell to the engineering community that don't engage as they should with NDT. So the second key points, key points two, really we need to engage business better. And I think there's a big lack when it comes to the insurance companies. I think in the regulated sectors, then we've got clear instruction as to when NDT is needed, and in the well-regulated industry there's a good connection between the designer, the materials engineer and the NDT engineer and the business side that is deciding how much money can you make out of this part and how long do you have to wait before you re-inspect it. But where it's only regulated by insurance companies, then I think there's quite a poor connection, and I think we need to correct that. As far as technology goes, the UK is really well placed in developing the technologies. And it was only 2 years ago, I think, at the South African conference, the RCND won 3 of the 5 world prizes for technology development. I mean, that is a stunning achievement for an organisation that wasn't then 10 years old. And I think we've got a really cherished organisation there, where we've got strong industry lead, we've got firm academic grounding, and we've got the money and the facilities, and we've just been refunded to fund ourselves through to 2020. So there's a real good well of technology that we can access. And also, we've set ourselves up in the UK with strong service companies and strong training organisations that can deliver the people that can wield these technologies. The real hurdle, I think, is the technique validation. And we're hoping that in the autumn statement this year, in December, the government's going to come good on a scientific infrastructure initiative where they're talking about spending £1.1 billion a year for 5 years on scientific infrastructure. And through our connections from the RCNDE, the Institute, and the EPSRC, who's trying to manage this, or would be managing this purchase, we've been able to put in there a realistic test facility is needed to validate our inspections. And that moves us from just being inspectors into part of a structural integrity community. So we've now got that report, and I want to just show some examples of how we've used it. RCND 3, which was the refunded research centre, the funding ran out for RCND 2 in April this year. So we spent about 18 months in that research organisation lobbying government to demonstrate that we actually needed it refunding, and we used elements of this report to demonstrate the impact that we can have if we get the NDT right. And that worked really well, and lo and behold, we did get refunded. Attached to the research centre is a doctoral training centre, and many of the presentations we've had here are from engineering doctorate researchers that are doing the work that the companies want doing. And again, that scheme was going to come to an end. I think this October will be the last intake of the recent grant. And we went through quite a nightmare of failing the selection process. And it was actually the only time I've been interested in the budget document, because this year in the budget document, I think it was on page 108, and near the bottom it said that £160 million would be put into further engineering doctorate centres. And there were 22 centres that would be refunded. There were 45 that were waiting to be funded. We were scoring number 40 out of the 45. But because we were able to make the case that we were important, and through this report, we got funded. So it didn't come down to how well we were scored by the groups that did the assessment. It came down to the political will of actually, are we worth funding? We're using the report for the Trailblazer scheme, which Roger Lyons is championing. And again, it's the same thing. It's how we're going to get the people into the business. And I think, again, it's a really powerful document for doing that. And I have seen that one or two companies using this document to demonstrate to their financiers that actually there is a market here, and it's of value, and it will be of a continuous value. So we will also, and it has also raised our profile with government. It did feature the announcement of the research centre, and this report were featured in a press statement or a press release given by Vince Cable at a talk he gave. I have to say that he didn't actually say the words non-destructive valuation during his talk, but he also didn't say non-destructive valuation, whatever that is, which I think was a big step forward. So further actions. BINDT are being tasked with establishing more facts about our business. We need more news stories to keep them being pumped into non-NDT media. And I think in the past we've been quite introspective. We've told ourselves about all the good things we do, but we don't tend to tell other people. So I want to see our articles of our successes in the IMEC e-journals, in the newspapers, on local radio. Any application for government funding should use this report to reinforce the case. And because basically it is government telling us what we ought to be doing with our sector. They commissioned us to do it, they've approved the report, so this is what we ought to be doing. The fact that we've told them what we ought to be doing is all to the good, because it's right. And the next step, the Technology Strategy Board has recently changed their name to extract themselves from being confused by the bank, and they're now called Innovate UK, and it's their task to take technologies through the higher technology readiness level. So RCND goes up to about 3, and then factories want it at 7. So there's that gap in between, and the technology and the Innovate UK guys are the ones who provide some of the funding to do that. We had a talk at the RCND on Monday from a lady who was managing the high-value manufacturing strand of their funding, and she was going on to us about the 22 competencies that they want to see in the engineering community. Well, in the back of this report, we list the 22 competencies and we describe how NDT impacts each one. And that came as a bit of a shock to her, so she then said, well, I think you better come and see us and we'll see how we can engage to get the technologies delivered. So that's a description of the report and where we stand with it at the moment. Who still hasn't got a copy? Excellent, that's the sort of life I like to see.